and welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable, real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins. Hey, everybody. Here we go. Another episode of the Real Estate Mogul MD. And today I'm speaking with a burnout prevention specialist who's an avid traveler who's visited more than 50 countries and lectured in many of those countries on avoiding professional burnout. He's a published brain exercise book author for both adults and children, multiple books here. So he's an author, a physician, a businessman, and an international lecturer, currently medical director and chief medical officer at multiple organizations. Wow. And you got to be a burnout specialist, to avoid burnout specialist is something like that. Dr. Scott Cook, how you doing today, man?
Hey, man, doing great, man. Really, really appreciate you asking me to come on.
That's awesome. Yeah. So many things. And right now I'm seeing a lot of this too, Scott, with the social media platforms and the burnout and everything. So I know that you have a lot of experience about this, and I'm loving to share this with the listeners out there today. Tell us a little bit about your medical journey, kind of just a summary of where you started and how you got to where you're at now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, unfortunately, when I was 6 months old, my mother died of cancer, and she got diagnosed while she was carrying me. So, back then there really weren't many therapeutics for cancer, no chemotherapy, or very little, I should say. And so they told her that, I would either, not survive birth, or I'd have a deformity or some problem. And they talked to her about terminating the pregnancy. She decided against it. I was fine, but I always kind of reflected back and tried to understand not only what happened to her, but kind of why I'm on the planet. That was the impetus for me to decide to go into medicine. Had a great journey, went through undergraduate school, graduate school, and then medical school, and really decided to work in underserved areas. So a lot of what I do clinically is I work taking care of patients that might have difficulty accessing physicians. And through that journey, just with some of my patients that I would see in practice who were professionals, and then my own journey at one point working in the emergency department, I got burned out. A lot of my patients were burned out. So I started to learn a little bit more about this burnout phenomenon and interviewed thousands of patients and decided to write a book, and the book's done very well, helping a lot of people.
That's awesome. What's the name of that book, Scott? It's
titled The Prescription to Heal Your Career. And the subtitle is it's a treatment plan for individuals and organizations. And that means that basically it's great for individuals to read if you're feeling burned out, but it's really fantastic for leadership people to read, people in supervisory roles, bosses, CEOs, to just try to learn a little bit about what their employees might be going through.
Very interesting. Have you ever heard of Dyke Hammond?
No.
Let me think. Let me just pull this up. I think it makes me think. I always love my conversations here and how they may lead to connection. Oh, I'm sorry. Dyke Drummond.
Okay.
Dyke Drummond. So he's a big advocate of recognizing and preventing burnout. So maybe I'll connect you guys after the show here and see if that's something that we guys could help each other's platform and reach more people kind of thing. But very interesting. So you've written the book, and also in the intro, we talked about brain exercise books. Is that related to the burnout?
Yeah, so my book's written in a very unique way, and it's, there's really no book on business or burnout like this. So in the book, I actually have several brain exercises that the reader is asked to complete as they read the book. And it's a way to really get people to think in a detailed way about where they are in their careers and maybe developing some prevention strategies to avoid burnout, or identifying that they're burned out, and some information about how they can get help. You talked about Drummond and prevention. That's kind of what my book's about. It's really trying to prevent it, but if burnout's already present, these brain exercises really help people wrestle with burnout and come up with some solutions.
That's awesome. Interesting too, what pops up in this conversation too, Scott, is this direction of corporations versus private practice kind of thing. Just generally speaking, I mean, what's that make you think when I mention that? I see you kind of nodding as I'm throwing that in there. What's that make you think?
Well, healthcare has really gone through a transformation over the years. And, back many years ago, like when I started medical school back in the dark ages, so to speak, most people were going through medical school, coming out, setting up a practice or working for a hospital, and that was it. But doctors now are really becoming business individuals, entrepreneurs, coming up with ideas where they can have ownership, creating brands, diversifying their portfolios, finding out ways to have passive income. So you see this pivot in medicine where physicians have become, pretty astute at business and understanding the business side of healthcare. And I think that diversity in terms of what you're doing every day is one of the strategies I talk about in the book to prevent burnout. So if you're just mundane, grinding every day, doing the same thing, it's kind of easy to get a little bit down and burned out. But if you're really doing all these other exciting things, creating things, it's one of the ways you can kind of stay away from feeling burnout.
Yeah. And something that pops into my mind there is equity versus wage, or profit versus wage. So there's a difference in that too. So not only the passion and the direction, Scott, but the way in which you're paid scenario too. So if I'm putting this in, and I come from the real estate world, and that is a big piece of what we do is the equity piece. And then this a never ending return perspective, where in the corporate, now, if that's the direction that I hear it say a lot too, I mean, I agree. If that's the direction you want to go and that's your life, that's great. So
absolutely.
There's a lot of people out there that do that and provide help and care and developmental direction and research and everything in that direction. So that's great. There's just a difference when it comes to that equity piece, and then that never ending return of working for yourself versus working for somebody else.
Yeah, that's a great point. You talk a lot about, passive income, and I talk a lot about passive income. But, the most interesting thing about it from a healthcare medicine standpoint is that, there's a section of my book where I talk about how to chase passion and not money. And there's a brain exercise in that chapter that's very interesting and kind of counterintuitive. But what people find out is if you really figure out what your passion is, maybe your passion is just to have a private practice, focus on that and help as many patients as possible. Great. Maybe your passion is to do multiple things. But if you find your passion and really why you're on the planet, what happens is initially careers of passion pay a little bit lower, but you have very high job satisfaction. People love it. But as time goes on, what happens, because you're doing your passion and you love it, you're going to perform very well. You're going to do well. You're going to have great evaluations. You're going to get promoted. So in the end, passions of career might start with lower salaries, but they end with higher salaries. So, it's interesting that I really think we all should chase our passions. I will say, as a caveat, there are times in life you have to just worry about money, right? Come out of school with a lot of student loan debt, have a catastrophic medical illness in your family. There's times you have to worry more about money than passion. But if you have the opportunity, it's better to really focus on passion.
Yeah, absolutely. I had watched a video from Alex Hormozy yesterday, and he's a younger gentleman, entrepreneur, very, very, he's just super sharp. And everything that he's collected through the years, trial and error, and grinding, it makes me think of this point in career. You say you're coming out of school with all this debt going into what you're doing. And if you're chasing that passion, you focus, you hunker down, and you don't come out buying cars and, buying houses because you're a doctor and all of this, but hunkering down, cutting your expenses, focusing on what you need, what's important for you in the future, not at what's important for you now, because it takes time and discipline to turn that direction of passion into the direction of passion and income.
Absolutely. It's funny, especially with physicians. Physicians historically have been very poor money managers. I heard it said once that it really doesn't matter how much you make. It matters how much you spend or save. So, all of us, no matter what our incomes are, you can overextend yourself. But focusing on passion, you're right. It's one way to avoid some of these pitfalls.
Yeah. I saw somebody speaking of the burnout direction, and I think it was on LinkedIn, and he mentioned the personality type of some physicians not being able to say no. Mm-hmm. And when you pair that in the corporate world, that's difficult. If you pair it in the passion world, it's difficult too, because if you can't say no, then it's hard. I struggle with that as well too. What is your take on that, Scott, on the ability to say no in relation to burnout?
Great question. And in fact, just yesterday, I can't take credit for this, but I saw it on social media, I believe LinkedIn, where it was a post with an image and it just said, no is a complete sentence.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of times people try to justify why they're saying no, or we feel bad. And you're right. Doctors, people like yourself, people who are compassionate individuals, we have a hard time because we want to try to be of service. But really, if you're not able to say no and you're not able to understand no is really a complete sentence, then you can get, caught up in trying to maybe please everybody. And you can get caught up in doing things that maybe are not in your own best interest. So I think that's something we all have to do. Having that no switch where you can, turn it on and off is one way to really prevent being taken advantage of, which would lead to burnout.
Yeah. And I think, as a leader, when I have, I call it, solopreneurs, or, the entrepreneur or solo, intrapreneur, there's the word I was looking for, mm-hmm. around me. And I focus on the goal and I take off running. And I always joke around that sometimes I turn my head and look beside me and all of a sudden I got nobody behind me because somebody there around me has said no. And that's the most, really, it's so hard for me to understand no, because I don't say no. I don't say no enough.
Me neither.
Right? So when I hear no, I'm like, how could you? How could you do that?
Absolutely.
Don't you know where we're going?
Right.
So it's hard. But the thing is, you got to be able to say it. And if you look at so many accomplished people with proven results, consistent results, they have that consistency of being able to and knowing when to say no.
Yep. Absolutely. That's so true.
Very, very interesting. So just touching on the passive income, I am excited to talk about this with the burnout direction, because it's finding that place where these two worlds collide, this passion piece and the wealth piece. And obviously, if there's a direction or a path where the listeners and all of us can connect these two of these things, or even point them in the same direction, right? If we point these two things in the same direction, it may not be today, it may not be next year or 10 years, but those lines will intersect at some point. Tell us a little bit about your passive investing and some of the experience that you've had along the way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I, back in 2010 to 2012, certainly pre-pandemic, thought about creating a company where I would do telemedicine. And this was really before telemedicine was super popular. And I told some of my colleagues, I'm going to create a virtual medical practice. So I'm going to have a practice without an office. And at the time, it just sounded totally nuts. And people are like, what are you talking about? Like, where will you get your patients? How will you, make any income? And I said, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. My point was, the one thing I did understand is I'll have little or no overhead. You see, most medical practices have very high overhead, which would be between 50 and 70%. They have to pay salaries of staff, rent, utilities, medical supplies, et cetera. And in my case, I had startup costs and some, medical equipment, very little, but that was it. So my thought was, I'm either going to make no money, which is fine, or I'm going to make some, but I'm not going to lose any. So I think that's one thing people can think about is trying to create business opportunities where there's little overhead, number one, trying to find a niche that makes you unique, and then creating a brand around your idea, marketing it, using the leverage of social media to get the idea out, and then doing something that's different and unique. That was my process. So I created this practice. It did very well. And I was able to start to hire additional doctors and nurse practitioners. And now it's really done amazing. So that was my first kind of step into the entrepreneurial world. And I was able to generate some passive income.
Yeah, call that taking sniper shots. And a sniper shot is going to be something it's low cost. It's not going to change your world if it fails, because the most of the time we're going to get failure.
Oh, yes.
And we're going to have those people around us saying that I told you so. That was a crazy idea, Scott. Why would you ever do that? And guess what? I heard this from the clip I was telling you about in Alex Hormozi yesterday. They're going to be right every single time until they're wrong.
Exactly.
And that time that they're wrong, that changes your world, and that changes everybody's world. So you take those little sniper shots with that low cost, low overhead, it's okay if it fails scenario. It won't change your life. And then you get that empirical evidence. Once you start getting that feedback, so, now I can add this expense. Now I can add this expense with relation to the return on the expense, right? So, and we start dropping in these sniper shots, and they turn into like missiles. And then all of a sudden we're launching cannonballs, when this thing really hits the market. So I really like that. I think that's great advice. And just that, when the listeners do come out, and I'm sure everyone that's had a similar kind of experience, that everything is crazy. Everything starts with an idea, and it's typically, if it's niched, if it's special, if it's not out there already, if it's outside of the box, it's going to be crazy. So you're going to have 100%. The people around you that are going to say you're crazy.
Yeah, you think back to sort of Bill Gates and Steve Jobs when they said that at some point, back when we had rotary phones and landlines and very few mobile phones. And when you had a mobile phone, it was huge. And they said you're going to have a handheld phone one day where you'll be able to call people, send pictures, check what's called email, look up anything and get the answer quickly. People could not even conceptualize what they were saying because it sounded ridiculous. But I tell you, my success is on a much, much smaller scale. But one of the most rewarding things is there's one doctor in particular I work with who just totally had thought I'd lost my mind. And a lot of my colleagues said, man, Dr. So-and-so is really just running your name in the mud. But now when I see Dr. So-and-so in the hospital, he almost doesn't want to talk. Hey, good to see you. And he walks by quick because he's seen the success. So that's like the best pat on the back I could get.
Yes. That is the point in case of the one time he was wrong. Right. Because he's a naysayer for thousands of times, and he or she, the one time they were wrong, that's it. The payback is success. Absolutely. The payback is head down, focused on that goal, because when that passion direction aligns with this wealth direction, it's right. And I feel that everybody has this opportunity to focus on this, Scott, and especially coming down to the burnout kind of direction. Everybody has the opportunity. Everybody has a unique set of experiences that they're blessed with. And the idea is like, okay, there's a perspective that I've been shown, and it's kind of relative to the quantum. Like everything is possible, right? And when you hold that in your mind and you overcome these walls or these barriers and think it can be me, I can do that. We're just so conditioned by the people that are around us, and in some cases, the people that are above us, holding us down. So our perspective limits our potential.
Yeah, that's true. I think on the flip side, we have to talk a little bit about pride and failure, as you mentioned failure, because, I heard Colin Cowherd, who is, a pretty famous sports analyst, say that, we really should be able to identify when things are not going well and not double down on failure. So in other words, pride, we might have an idea it doesn't work. You have to be able to identify that, pivot and change, and not just sort of keep doing something that's not working because of pride. So when things aren't working, we should really maybe change directions. And that's just something I want to remind the listeners of. Absolutely.
And it takes, to me, failure, I guess true failure should never happen, because you really should never give up. And failure happens when you stop trying. So this idea of, okay, don't let your pride keep you from recognizing what's in front of you and doing a slight pivot. And the pivots can be market related, could be data related, could be people related.
Huge. I want to tell you something about my idea, my practice, because I failed initially. So when I decided to have this virtual office, I decided to call it the Travel Doctor with an X on the end, like RX prescription. Right. So the Travel Doctor X. And I was going to do travel medicine. So I love to travel, as you said in my introduction. And I wanted to do like travel vaccines, prevention of motion sickness, any travel related problems, gastrointestinal issues. And so it was really my idea to have a travel medicine practice. And I had a few patients the first month. And then what I realized, there's not enough business in this niche, but I'd already created the company. So I identified it quickly and said, well, I already have the name. What could I do? Well, it's a virtual office. I can just travel to see patients. And I don't know what kind of patients, but I'll start trying to market. Hey, I'm a doctor who travels. I can see patients at your facility. I made house calls. And then it morphed into this organization where we get contracts in multiple states and we travel to see patients. And so the original idea really didn't work, but I was able to make a pivot.
Yeah, absolutely. And the pivot piece, it keeps you on in the right direction because, and again, it's back to that sniper shots and then cannonballs kind of thing. Yeah. If I pick up and say, oh, this travel thing isn't working, let me go try this where travel pharmacy or something, it's a totally different direction. So you lose your progress. Right. There was a book, Scott, I can't remember which book it was, but it was a book or a picture showing this person digging for gold. And it may have been a real world scenario, but they dug and dug and dug. And this is years and years and years. And they got to the point where like, I'm done. That's it. I'm out. And somebody else came and bought the area for a discounted price, right? And digs 3 more feet. And they find like one of the largest stocks of whatever they were digging for, gold or oil or whatever, ever. Wow. 3 feet, right? Wow. So the idea is even if they would have pivoted, even if, there was something there that just wasn't on. So it's one, not giving up, and 2, making sure that you're tracking KPIs, you're looking at stuff that matters most to you, right. And making that little pivot is a big thing too. And when the market pushes you, when people pushes you, when the returns push you, when expenses push you, there's always opportunity.
Absolutely. Great analogy.
Yep. So keep digging. Yeah. In the big book, the Bible, there's lots of same type of analogies and, just so much about keep doing what's right. You align your values and your time and you keep on that path. And fruit will come, so keep big. I just want to jump off on the traveling thing here. What's the coolest place that you've been to, Scott?
Boy, that's such a hard question.
Yeah, right. There's so many.
I've really loved every trip. Some were better than others, but I always find some joy. But I would say a few. I've been to several countries in Africa. Mm-hmm. Being an African-American male and going back to the motherland, just transformational experience. So that's been amazing. Yeah. I love the country of Portugal and Europe. Oh, yeah. Really wonderful. I love the Caribbean and South America. But my one tip to people would be to don't forget Central America. So a lot of people go to Caribbean islands for vacation. Central America is, to me, a better value. There's more culture. They still have beautiful beaches, but there's sort of more to do and more history. So places like Costa Rica, Panama, Belize, Guatemala, great places. So Central and South America and Africa are probably my favorites.
Very interesting. As soon as you mentioned Portugal, Spain, right? I think of the seafood there.
Oh, yeah. Very inexpensive and plentiful and great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Favorite food during your travels?
It depends. I try to usually have whatever is local. So if I'm in Portugal, it's on the coast. It's always seafood. Yeah. So I sort of, I'm not too picky. So whatever the regional specialty is, I usually have.
Love it. One of the reasons I love traveling is food and architecture, and the history and the architecture. Those 2 things combined is absolutely amazing. In traveling too is just interesting. I've not done a lot of traveling. I'm definitely blessed in the opportunities that I've had. It makes me think when we go certain places that there are certain types of vaccines, or are there any type, you mentioned that your first idea was the traveling doctor thing.
Sure.
Is there any, feedback that you could give the listeners on, hey, you should look out for, you should consider this when traveling to Central, to traveling to South, to traveling to Europe?
I would say, honestly, just to go to the CDC's website and just type in travel or travel advisory. And they have a page on every country about what's required or what to watch out for from a health standpoint. So that's really huge. And then I would also just remind people to try to travel even in their home country or internationally, because there's lots of health benefits of travel. So I think it's a win-win.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of jumping around back here now to the passive income thing. Have you ever invested in real estate at all, Scott?
No, I haven't, other than my primary homes, but I've purchased and sold multiple homes and done extremely well. So now I'm at a point in my career where I do have some passive income, and it's something I'm just starting to get into. So more to come. I wish I would have gotten to it years ago, quite honestly. I think it's one of the most sound investments if you get good property.
Yeah, that's one of the things I hear a lot too. I wish I would have done it a lot. And that's investing. I mean, hindsight is 2020, right? So we hear this a lot. Right. I echo that with the quote, the best time to buy real estate is 20 years ago.
That's right.
And today,
now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Because 20 years ago, it's going to happen.
Absolutely.
20 years from now. So have that idea of, okay, go ahead and invest. Just love drilling in on this too, Scott, and say, what is it that, you said it's the most sound investment, as your perspective there. And I agree. What are some of the things that you like about investing in real estate?
I like the fact that as long as the initial purchase was sound or solid, and as long as it's maintained, it really is only going to go up. Unless there's something in the area that makes it depreciate, it's just going to go up. So I have two friends that basically have two different scenarios. One of them purchased a house, and over the course of the past 20 years, he gave back the bank approximately $500,000. My other friend did not purchase a house, rented. He actually gave about $500,000 in rent. So today, my friend who rented really has nothing to show for it. My friend who purchased, he just sold his house for $700,000. So you have the people who put out the same amount, but one has a huge amount of money because they can sell the property. The other really has nothing. So that is an unbelievable just image to think about. So it's a sound thing. It's going to go up and appreciate. I just don't think you can lose as long as you do your homework initially.
Yeah. And the acquisition is where you make your money, and the exit is where you realize your money. Correct. So you had mentioned as long as the purchase is sound, and that's, absolutely, we always bear down on that. Market relative, repair relative, all of these things that we consider income on a rental property when we make the acquisition. Because at that point, we remove the emotion, Scott, and it's all about math. It's all about the equation. And the interesting piece about the two scenarios that you gave there, the $500,000 and then sold for $700,000, he likely, it sounds like to me in that situation, he had lived in the house.
Yes.
And he had lived in the house for, I believe it's in most states, it's more than 2 years. So he didn't have capital gains then on that $200,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, if so, a small amount. And come to think about it, it's over 20 years. So he had it almost paid off. So let's say he owed $150,000, sold it for $700,000. I mean, he's going to now net more than $500,000 back.
I guess playing the devil's advocate on that, the naysayers for the real estate is he had to pay interest. So there's probably a lot of interest in there as well too.
True.
But even at that point, the actual rent that somebody had paid was probably less, or then I don't know.
They were close.
It was
the monthly payments were very close.
Yeah, so the $500,000, maybe that was principal and interest. The other guys was just rent. So
that's absolutely true.
Yeah. So we get down into this. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say some people have done poorly and lost money with real estate, but it's people who just thought, I'm going to buy up a bunch of homes. They did no research. They're going to fix them up and flip them, but they don't really have the skills to fix them up. So you have to, do some homework and be honest with yourself.
Absolutely.
But it's very safe.
And what I tell everybody, there's no guarantee in anything. If somebody tells you there's a guarantee in an investment, then you need to turn around and go the other way.
Absolutely.
What we say is a risk-adjusted return.
Sure.
And even for me in real estate, man, I've had a few deals where it's been like, no way, I would never do that again. It's in looking at those as learning instances. So they're out there. What I love about single family is it's an easy entry point. It's requires less capital to get in. The mistakes are smaller.
Yes.
So it's easier to build resources, team members, and all of that around. Because when you do have a mistake, when you do have a mistake, it doesn't wreck everything,
Correct.
Yeah, so it's a great place to start. If you were to start in real estate, it sounds like you have an interest in it.
Absolutely.
Given, you do your due diligence and research and all of that, where do you feel like you would start?
I would start talking to someone like you and getting some consulting education. Because, a lot of doctors I know even really, when there was that big real estate boom before the crash, they just started buying up stuff and getting into it without understanding it. And I think that's a pitfall to avoid, meaning because you have a lot of education in one area, you still need to educate yourself in this new area you're going to go into and talk to experts. So I don't know the answer, but I would start with talking to someone like you and learning more, and then getting some education and then making the decision that'll be an informed decision.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They say the world of real estate is the world of relationships. And when you leverage relationship, it allows you to grow at a different pace. And when you're outside of your profession, your lane, it's helpful to work with other people who have proven results, who have experience, who are transparent, and all of these things blend well together. I've got a platform, Scott, that I'm literally trying to give away the front end of single family residential rental, from acquisition to management, all of that stuff. I'm going to share that with you. And if there's anybody out there listening to this for this exact same reason, I'm presenting this stuff because I want to share it. It's not secrets. Right? Everybody is doing this. It's just finding that place where, one, you can get it from somebody you trust who's really not trying to sell you anything.
Right.
So completely free, giving this stuff away. But you'd be surprised how many people don't take advantage of it. Right. So I know there's this thing of time involved, and I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do that. So there's that thing in there, but I'll share that with you and see if maybe we could work on something on the, avoiding, because there's a link here, Scott. There's a link in avoiding that burnout. There's, we say house rich, car rich, all of these things that, or house poor, car poor, all of these things that keep you tied into this thing. And on the back burner, as a high income earner, you have the ability to do this path, right?
Absolutely.
In whatever path it is, I don't know. It may not be single family. Another great place to start is in syndications, because it's very, very passive. There are things that you definitely have to watch out for and learn as well, learning how to vet a general partner, how to be a good limited partner, all of these things to pick up, but it's 100% passive, to where owning and controlling real estate is way more active, but there are paths forward that aren't as active as others, if that makes sense.
It does. Something interesting you said about, you want to sort of give the information away. People are traditionally, in general, very skeptical. So, I do speaking engagements on the book, and they go over very well. But afterwards, people will come up and they'll sort of think I want to sell the book. Well, of course, I'd like people to have the book, but it's more a ton of very effective information that worked for me and many of my patients, and I want to share it. And so sometimes when people are skeptical, I'll even say, here, you can have the book as long as you promise me you'll read it, no charge. And they still think there's an angle. So I'd like listeners to know that, sure, a lot in life, people have angles, but there are times people really are there to help.
Yep. Stop selling and start helping. It creates a transition. The old Zig Ziglar that transition of truly helping. And, there are paths and mechanisms in all of what we do to get to a certain point of working with somebody. Obviously, for us, there's a platform where it's a one-on-one type of platform. But I'm not, like you're saying, I'm not trying to sell that to get to this point where I'm just trying to give it away. And the idea of, the listeners out there, finding that right person who you can have a genuine relationship and understand that everybody's not out to get something from them.
For sure.
And that there is value in these relationships. There's value in expanding your association to put your path. And I talked about it earlier, take that passion and aim it at this intersection with your wealth.
Absolutely.
And you can get there faster by expanding your association and being around people that have done something similar, and have results to show you in that way. For
sure. Very well said.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I could go on for days and days and hours talking about this stuff. I really appreciate your time, Scott. And if the listeners out there, they could probably find your book at bookdrcook.com.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. On Amazon, or that's an easy way to find it at my website.
So bookdrcook.com.
bookdrcook.com.
bookdrcook.com. That's awesome. And the book is there. And then your direction too. I'm going to share this platform with you and anybody that you could share it with. Again, just finding that path and saying, hey, here's this. But then we kind of bump up against this wall of skin in the game. And, and I get asked that a lot, being a, consultant kind of thing. Well, where's your skin in the game? Right.
Right.
And if we give away knowledge, if we give away this stuff, how is the listener or the person going to value it if they didn't have to pay for it?
Yeah.
So, just kind of thinking of that stuff too. Is there anything else that you wanted to add for the listeners that maybe reaching out to you or something that you could help them with?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy to chat with people. The website's a great place to go, not only for the book, but information about other services. I have my personal email and phone number there. I'm happy to talk to people about their careers, do some career coaching, and talk people through anything they might be experiencing from a medical standpoint or even as an entrepreneur. And, no charge. It's just something I love to do. So please reach out, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a great conversation. Just very genuine person, Dr. Cook, and I appreciate that. So for the listeners out there today, any questions, just even thoughts or connecting with Dr. Cook regarding the avoiding burnout, signs of burnout, or the entrepreneur piece, I think he had some great points about that test and measure application of just starting that process, taking a shot, and understanding that, that there's this path forward. Everybody has their own set of experiences. And this path forward that Dr. Cook had mentioned is a great way to take these little shots. I'm going to throw it back to the analogy of you have two vectors here. One is your passion, one is your wealth. And when you point those two at an intersecting path, there's just great things to not only happen in your life, but just think of all the great things that you could bring to other people when those two vectors cross. So
beautiful said. Like you said, you mentioned the big book or the good book. One of my favorite things in there is to whom much is given, much is required. So a lot of us do things because we have been certainly blessed, and we'd like to share that.
Yes, absolutely. So don't go bury your bag of gold.
Right.
How about that parable for you? Don't bury your bag of gold. Thank you for listening again today. It's been absolutely wonderful having you guys, and Dr. Cook, thank you as well. You can reach him at bookdrcook.com. And if you've got any questions for us, any topics you'd like to hear, you can reach us at info@physicianwellsystems.com. Don't forget to head on over to Apple or Spotify and leave us a review. It helps us get out in front of other people and get other people on the show to give you some more information. So until next time, thank you so much.